After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the Marris model of managerial enterprise, explore the relationship between profitability and growth through managerial security constraints, demand growth curve and the supply of capital growth curve. Learn about the utility level of managers and owners and their impact on management's decision. Evaluate optimal or balanced growth position for a firm in terms of diversification. Several studies have identified that the managerial behavior and goals of the management are different and independent from the goals of the shareholders. The reason why the goals are different and what can be done to achieve the goals has been explained by Marris's model of managerial enterprises. The model is based on managers' goal to increase balanced growth of the firm by maximizing the growth in demand and growth of capital. The main objective of the managers is to increase the demand using the retained profits and at the same time distribute enough dividends to the shareholders, preventing setting in of discontentment among the shareholders. The rest of this module deals with Marris's model of managerial enterprises and tries to explain the managerial security constraints, demand growth curve and the supply of capital growth curve. It further explores utility level of managers and owners in achieving the goal and finally looks at the impacts of diversification on growth. Robin Marris model, ownership and control separation. The genesis of the Marris model lies in the phenomenon of separation of ownership and control. Here the shareholders either have little or no direct control over the decisions taken by the management. This separation comes with associated benefits and costs. In case of separation, a hierarchical decision may be more efficient than market allocation under certain conditions requiring certain decisions. The major concern with respect to separation has been raised by Adam Smith. According to him, the managers may not behave in the way they would have in a owner-manager setup due to lack of incentives. Further, Jensen and Meckling in 1976 considered the separation as an agency problem where shareholders are the principals and managers are the agents and the associated costs are the usual principal-agent costs. The costs include expenses on monitoring made by the shareholders, expenses on bonding by the managers and loss from behavioral divergence. Marris's model of managerial enterprise. In 1964, Robin Marris published a book entitled The Economic Theory of Managerial Capitalism, where he developed a managerial theory of the growth of the firm. It is based on the proposition that firms are managed by the managers and the shareholders are the owners of the firm who take decisions on the management of the firms. The theory assumes that the owners and managers work with different objectives. The managers aim at maximizing the growth of the firm, while the owners aim is to maximize the profits through dividends and share prices. The owners, by purchasing a share or the ownership rights in the firm, have the right to receive future dividend payment. In case the managers opt for high growth rate for the firm, they will need to create more demand and come up with new products. This would increase the expenditure on advertisement and R&D, thereby forcing the managers to hold back a larger share of the profit to be used for these activities. As a consequence, profits distributed in the form of dividends to the shareholders would come down, leading to a fall in share prices also. Under such conditions, the firm may become prone to takeovers. The concerns of the manager thus become twofold: their own job security and also growth of the firm. The focus of the managers would then shift towards attaining the growth rate such that it maximizes the market value of shares, gives satisfactory dividends to shareholders, and minimizes the chances of takeover of the firm. The owners or the shareholders will also like to have balanced growth of the firm, as that could ensure a reasonable return on their capital. Thus, both the owners and managers will be working on achieving the similar goal of balanced growth. The share price of any firm is a function of current dividend D, the growth rate of dividends G, and the share owners' discount rate R, reflecting their earnings in case of alternative investments. If we assume a 3-year time horizon, the share price can be calculated as the managers want to maximize the growth rate of the firm by sacrificing profits to achieve growth, their preference would be to retain the profits within the firm so that the retained earning can be used for growth opportunities. This confirms the trade-off between the decision to retain or disperse the dividends and the growth rate that a firm can achieve. Figure 1 shows the trade-off between the two. The proportion of the profits paid as dividends is presented on the vertical axis and the growth rate is presented on the horizontal axis. Thus, if the firm pays OA% of profit as dividends, then the firm has 80% of the profit left with it to finance growth. GA is the achievable growth rate corresponding to OA. Thus, it is clear from figure 1 that if the proportion of profit paid as dividend is more than OA, the growth achieved by the firm will be lower, while the firm will achieve higher growth if the proportion paid is less than OA. The managerial decision for growth becomes limited by the need to pay dividends to the shareholders. This in turn limits the proportion of the profit to be retained for financing growth. The managers have to be cautious in determining how far they can pursue growth, as they can do so only as long as they are able to keep the shareholders happy and satisfied. If the shareholders view the proportion retained by the managers adversely, they may try to influence the policy or they may tend to sell the shares. The extent to which the managers will be in a position to retain the proportion of the profit to finance growth can be understood by exploring the relationship between profitability and growth through managerial security constraints, demand growth curve and supply of capital growth curve. Managerial security constraints and source of finance. A firm's current stock market value is determined by multiplying the number of shares issued with share price. The value is maximized only when the present value of expected returns to shareholders is also maximized. Share price of the firm reaches maximum when the firm achieves a growth rate that maximizes profits. Both for growth and to achieve profits, the firm needs to make a commitment to assign a proportion of current profit in any one year to finance growth. Internal finance is not the only source, as firms can raise funds through debt capital or new equity. However, debt borrowing would require the firm to pay the amount borrowed along with annual interest. These payments are to be made before paying dividends to shareholders. This reduces the proportion of the profit available to distribute as dividends, resulting in a fall in the share price and in the market value of the firm if the managers decide to reduce expected future dividend payments. In case the firm raises funds through new equity, the cost of equity is the future dividend that the new shareholders will receive. To ensure that the new equity does not cut into the profits due to existing shareholders leading to a downfall of the share price, managers should make all efforts to maintain high profits on the investments so as to pay increased dividend to all shareholders meeting their expectations. Failure to achieve this might result in shareholders becoming discontent and selling their shares, which would further reduce the market value of the firm. Another major constraint for managerial pursuit of growth is the response of shareholders to future performance of the firm. If the shareholders intend to sell more shares than potential buyers demand, prices will start to fall and the stock market value of the firm will be reduced as compared to its assets. This would create conditions suitable for takeover by other companies, and if they succeed in their bid, existing top managers may end up losing their positions or their jobs. Marris came up with a very effective measure for evaluating the performance of the management, which he termed as valuation ratio. This is the ratio between market value and book value. Market value of the firm is the representation of the market's assessment of current and future performance of the firm, while the book value is the value of the resources utilized by the firm and represents the capital or asset value of the firm. A firm is considered to be in a weak position if the valuation ratio is less than 1, as its market value is less than the value of the assets it is utilizing. If the market value is greater than the book value, the valuation ratio is greater than 1. The firm is then in a good position. If the firm valuation ratio is greater than the value expected by the market to be appropriate for that sector, the firm is considered to be in a strong position and the management is performing well. If the valuation ratio is less than as expected by the market, then the firm is in a relatively weak position and the management is not performing as well as its rivals in the sector. Thus, if the management wants to avoid a situation where the firm becomes an easy target for takeover and safeguard its own position, it needs to make good use of its assets. It is also required to carry on their policies of x-axis and the valuation ratio given on the y-axis. The point of tangency EM between the managerial indifference curve M2 and the valuation curve represent the point where the utility of the managers will be maximized. The managers presumably favor higher growth than the owners, hence GO and GM, the preferred growth rates, do not coincide. Growth of the firm and diversification. One of the major constraints on the growth of the firm is the rate of growth of demand for existing products. The firm's decision to diversify into production of new products and sell them in a faster growing market can help it overcome this constraint. Optimal or balanced growth position for a firm in terms of diversification has been analyzed by Marris. Diversification need not be always successful, as all new products may not be profitable in the market. The success of diversification in ensuring a profitable position for the firm in the market depends on the number of consumers who change their preferences in favor of the new product. The number of diversification projects that a firm undertakes will also have an impact on the products. Projects that are undertaken first tend to earn higher return as compared to those started later on. Figure 5 shows the relationship between growth in demand and diversification for different levels of profit. The curves slope upward towards the right with a diminishing slope. Each of the curves represents the demand growth curve in relation to different level of profit, with d pi 1 representing a lower level of profit as compared to d pi 2 and d pi 3. Thus, it is clear from the figure that for a given rate of growth of demand OG2, as the level of diversification increases from R1 to R2 to R3, the level of profit also increases. Thus, for a given level of diversification OR2, the growth rate associated with lowest profit level of d pi 1 is OG1, while with d pi 3 it is OG3. Profits are lower on d pi 3 as additional cost is required to achieve high growth rate for consumer demand. Thus, it can be concluded that if the expenditure on selling the new product of a diversified firm is higher, then for a given rate of diversification and a given price of the product, profits will be lower. The relationship between the rate of growth of supply and rate of diversification represented by supply curve S pi is shown in figure 6. In case of diversification projects, rate of growth of supply of resources is a function of the ratio of dividends retained or disbursed. It has been found that as the retention increases, rate of diversification achieved also increases. If it is assumed that there is a limit to the level of diversification achieved by a firm, then the maximum achievable diversification is given by OR4. The supply curves slope upward from right to left with diminishing slopes. From figure 6, it becomes evident that for a given growth OG1, higher level of profits allow for higher rates of diversification like R1, R2 and R3. For a given level of diversification R1, higher the profits associated, higher the growth achieved. Thus, the growth in supply OG3 is associated with S pi 3 and OG1 is associated with S pi 1. Figure 7 is obtained combining figure 5 and 6, which gives the equilibrium outcome of the diversification and growth. The point of intersection of the growth and demand curves for each given level of profit gives the equilibrium position for each level of profits. the dotted line LMN obtained by joining the intersection points or the equilibrium positions gives a balanced growth level. Thus, for any given level of profit, there exists an optimal combination of growth and diversification. Marris model is based on the proposition that firms are managed by the managers and the shareholders are the owners of the firm. Managers aim at maximizing the growth of the firm. Owners maximize the profits through dividends. Marris used valuation ratio, the ratio between market value and book value, to evaluate the performance of the management. Value greater than the value expected by the market to be appropriate. The firm is considered to be in a strong position and the management is performing well. The demand growth curve and supply of capital curve is used to show the two-way relationship between growth and profitability. Demand growth curve initially rises and then declines as the profit declines after a certain point. Supply capital curve is given as a linear function of growth. Owner's utility is a function of rate of profits or the dividends and rate of growth, which is the capital gain. While managers presumably favor higher growth than the owners, hence their preferred growth rate does not coincide with the owners. Optimal or balanced growth position for a firm in terms of diversification has been analyzed by Marris. If the expenditure on selling the new product is higher, then for a given rate of diversification and a given price of the product, profits will be lower. Rate of growth of supply of resources is a function of the ratio of dividends retained or disbursed. The higher the retention, higher level of diversification achieved.